The Dubuque Area Arts Collective presents Ruix Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy 2016. This is Jon Eagle, and welcome to the Ruix Podcast. I know that the last episode, the Aaron Headley episode, was technically the first one to air in 2016. But you see, when we taped that, we thought it was going to be out earlier. Just got behind a little bit. So this is officially the first intro that I'm taping in 2016. So I hope you are well. I hope your holidays were good. I know, I sing the praises of the holidays a lot. If you know me, you know this. But I know that it's not always the most happy, of the happiest of occasions for everybody. So I hope that, your holidays went well and you got everything you wanted, or at least some things that you wanted, and that it wasn't too stressful or upsetting. Now, that being said, it is a little bit of a slow time because of the holidays and because it's winter here in terms of DAAC events. But we are going strong with the In Harmony show. A couple of those episodes have actually already begun airing on channel MC22 on Dubuque Public Access TV, as well as on Highway 11 Films, which is the YouTube channel run by our own Dean Wellman. And those are uncut too. He's got a lot of cool stuff up there. Like there's the full interview between Pete Balistreri and myself, which, bits and pieces of were found in I believe, episode 2 of In Harmony. But you can see the full interview on there. It's about 45 minutes, and he's got some great stories. And Dean's got a lot of cool shit up there. So I urge you to go and, poke around on his channel, check it out. There's a lot of stuff from, cool local Dubuque bands and some stuff from his own medicine band. So yeah, check it out. He's got some good stuff up there. Also, January 29th is that's coming up as well. That's Music Series 10. Or maybe we're calling it Music Series 11. I'm not entirely sure. If you'll remember, Music Series 10 was originally going to be in December, but because of a snowstorm, we had to cancel it, unfortunately. So this will officially be the 10th music series that we've done, but we might be calling it Music Series 11 just because, I don't know. The flyer's not out yet, so whatever. We'll just see what it says. But that's not really the important part of what I'm trying to say here. The show itself will feature Madison's Tyranny is Tyranny, and then two beloved local bands, Young Indian and Snuff Queen. That'll be a heavy one, so check that out. And also, Tyranny is Tyranny have agreed to come down and talk to me for the Ruix Podcast. So that episode will be airing probably early February. So look for that. Today's episode. Now, what can I say about today's guest? Jeremy Brashaw and I have been close friends for a couple of decades now, and I'm so glad that we had him on the show. He lives in Denver now, and he's a Dubuque guy. And honestly, he came back for the holidays. And I was, just kind of looking for a reason to have him on the show because, I just think that, our rapport is pretty entertaining anyway. But, there's sort of a theme that we're trying to, maintain here on the Ruix Podcast. But I think if you listen, that you will find that he actually fills in some pretty important gaps in the early 90s music scene. That we've been sort of almost building, with the Bob episode and a couple other guests that we've had. The DIY music scene in general here in Dubuque that's been going on, that I've been a part of, and I think he has some interesting things to say. I'd also like to add that like I said, it was a pleasure to have him on. He's one of my best friends, and I don't know. Just go check it out now, and let's see what you think. He's a charismatic fellow. So let's check it out. Yeah, this is actually, we usually don't use the high top.
Oh, yeah?
No. We can just launch in anytime. You going, man? Okay. I'm going to adjust my mic here.
Ready when you are.
What do you, well, first of all, Jeremy Brashaw sitting with me, and one of my best friends from way back. But you know, we for the last few months, like we're just trying to figure out a reason why this episode's actually happening, because you know, I mean, like
the soon-to-be lowest-rated episode of your podcast series.
Well, we'll see. You might beat Brett Miller for the least listened to. But we. I mean, obviously, we have history together. You have history in Dubuque, and you know, but the show's sort of
Dubuque centric.
Yeah, it's Dubuque centric,
and I live in Denver, Colorado.
Right. But I guess not that, you know, like you have to because we're already doing the show. But like, I just want to hear your sales pitch as to why, real quick, why this is going to be a good episode.
Why this is going to be a good episode?
Yeah.
That seems like
treat me
a freshman year of college question.
Yeah, put it in the form of an essay.
Yeah. 500 words, double space.
Complete sentences.
Complete sentences, of course. Well, like you said, we had a lot of history together. Obviously, playing music, and I don't know. We kind of came up in a weird time where Dubuque started transitioning away from not just musically, I think, but more culturally away from the sort of old Dubuque, which is the, you know, butt metal. I mean, there's still butt metal, thankfully.
Thank God, yeah.
Yeah, there's still butt metal.
Well, most of that butt metal was also, you know, like covers of other butt metal.
Covers of other butt metal, which is a great...
That's an important distinction.
Which is a great Queens of the Stone Age side band.
Right.
And then, you know, Dubuque's obviously way different from what, you know, I remember as a kid growing up. And a lot of that transition, you know, it's interesting. We talked about this previously. A lot of that's been interesting to watch from most of the time about 800 miles away at least.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and seeing that it's become now this thing where you have the Dubuque, you know, Area Arts Collective, you have that, you have, you know, the shows that have been happening at the Lift for all this time. I mean, good or bad.
Yeah.
And it's no longer kind of like necessarily, you know, this crusty Midwestern town. It's become much more of an art-centric area.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's been really interesting to kind of observe from far away, especially sort of growing up when that was just beginning to take root.
Yeah,
in a way,
it was stifling back then. I remember.
Yeah, and a lot of those things, kind of at the time, it felt like, well, it's a small amount of progress, but nothing's ever going to happen with it. And you know, maybe that's just being impatient too. But at the same time, now it's, you know, what, 25 years on, and when you know, I say to somebody like, "Hey, I'm from Dubuque," you know what I mean? They're like, "Oh, well." You know, you don't hear like, oh, Dubuque, well, whoa,
whoa. Wow, cultural hub.
Yeah, I mean, like there's actual things going on, and there's bands that are from here that have been touring, you know, across the country, and you know, seeing that from early on, it's been interesting to come back to that, especially as someone who's continued to also play music, just not necessarily in the Dubuque area.
But also, I mean, like, just specifically with the Dubuque Area Arts Collective, like, you sort of have a, you know, a connection with almost all of us. Because, you know, you grew up with me and Bob and...
Yeah, I played, you know, music with Bob quite early on.
Right. My brother, obviously, you've known for years. You've more recently become... you know, close with Drew and Matt, and it's I don't know. I honestly just wanted to give you shit and put you on the spot, like.
I don't mind
but
at all.
I think you definitely can speak on the progress that Dubuque has made. But let's actually start with how, because I think this is a bit of a debated topic between you and I, where we actually met, or what the story is. Because I remember that it was the Allison Henderson days. You know, like maybe like a 2 or 3 year window when I actually smoked weed in my life, because I was hanging out with, you know, a lot of people that did.
But a lot of dirt.
A lot of dirt, sure. No, I don't know. You know, those people aren't really dirt. They went on to become very successful
presidents of corporations.
Yeah, I don't
film
know
students.
Film students, yeah. And then I formed Beneath with Jim and Dave Hansen, Jim Meyer and Dave Hansen, and I just remember, like, and we would hang out, like, just for clarity for people listening. We were hanging out at this park, Allison Henderson, and just, you know, I don't know, getting away, smoking weed, skateboarding. I guess not me, but, you know. And then, you know, was it Coos that lived nearby, or I know you lived by Wash, but
Nate Lewis lived. We all kind of lived within a certain walking distance of that area. But the actual first time that I met you, I believe, was at, I don't know who it was. Somebody lived by Swiss Valley, and there was a battle of the bands.
Scott Lammer, that was his name. I remember that.
And there was a battle of the bands, if I recall correctly. And at that point in time, I mean, any sort of band playing in Dubuque, I mean, any sort of band playing in Dubuque, like, I was going to try and go to that, you know, have my parents drop me off, and regardless, I mean, you know, I heard about it, then I would go. And I recall meeting you then. I don't remember through who, but I remember sort of the burnt toast thing, you know.
Really?
If not the
sound, that early?
If not the sound of it, obviously, because of
the smell of it.
The smell of it, exactly. So, and then, you know, when we were that age, I think, you know, everybody was sort of forming these baby bands, as it were. You know, anybody with a basement or garage, or parents who would let them play. Yeah. And I, you know, I noticed that there was a need for bass players. There was a lot of guitar players, and everybody played poorly, so it didn't really matter. Yeah. But there was no bass players, and so I bought a bass from this girl, Heather Davison, and at that point, I think is when, or right around then, as I started playing with Nate and Coos. They had a bass player. I forget who it was, but, you know, it doesn't really matter. I mean, and then, you know, once we started playing, and then, you know, I think it kind of evolved from there, and that's when I met you again, and sort of.
And was that the band with Luke Frummel singing?
So early on that band had been, I think Luke had been singing, and it was Nate and Coos, and then again, I'm spacing on who the bass player was, but it doesn't matter. But by that point, they got rid of.
They didn't just stick like Rakuzik with a bass or whatever, and just like, just do something.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean,
could have been something like that, because I know he was hanging out at the time.
Yeah, too. I'm trying to think of who it was. But long story short, at some point they were like, "Hey," and this actually happened at a Guzzard show. That Guzzard show.
Oh yeah,
that happened at the American Legion. Like, you're playing bass, right? Like, yeah, I'm playing bass, and at that point. We're like, well, we should start playing. I'm like, well, you know, we have my parents' basement, and it sort of evolved from there that we started playing together, because, you know, playing in a basement, we could play whenever we wanted. And, you know, my mom sort of didn't really care as long as we cleaned up. We could play literally whenever we wanted. And so, you know, at some points we would play for, you know, 4 days out of the week. Yeah. And, I mean, it started off as covers, and then it slowly evolved into actually making original music. And that's kind of around the same time we started seeing, you know, there was other bands in Dubuque that were moving away, like younger bands, obviously, that were moving away from playing a lot of covers and moving into actually, you know, playing their own music. Yeah. And, I mean, obviously that had been going on before us, but sort of in the same age group or whatever. So, yep.
I could have sworn that Guzzard show was the first time, like the first actual Was there another show at the Legion? Maybe a few.
Well, there's
I remember seeing
there's sort
the
of
first time I saw. Was it not Moon Gadget? That was the Orlowskis, but
yeah, that was. So I guess that's another band that was sort of one of those bands that we, growing up, looked up to because these guys are opening for a band like Guzzard, and when you're a 15-year-old kid, a band like Guzzard, they must be touring in a bus, and I mean, you obviously don't know anything at that age,
right? Of course.
I think that was Shellac had played here first with Dis and Bricklayer Cake, and that was sort of, at least in my mind's eye, was sort of the beginning of a lot of those types of things happening in Dubuque, and from there was a lot more local bands they were sort of on the same ilk.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that Guzzard shows to me is where that started to come together.
Okay.
So
what was the first Flux Capacitor show? Because that would have been the band that eventually came into, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I think our first show was was actually a party.
Okay.
And I mean, it obviously wasn't good. I think we did a cover of Choke Bore. We did a cover. Those were kind of at the time like the Dubuque. If you may not have liked each other as people, but if you liked the same music, everybody was sort of hanging out in the same.
Yeah, you'll at least play shows together.
At least play shows together. So yeah, we. So I think that our first show was. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I remember the original bass player now.
Who was it?
Lindsay McCaw.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so our first show was at some party. Actually, it was at a party at Chris Rolling's house, and his dad almost ran over one of the people at the party. His dad was so pissed that Chris was having this party that he actually almost ran over one of the kids at the party, purposely with his Tercel. I think it might have been Dan Cosley, but
really,
yeah. But regardless, so that was our first show, and I mean, it was literally covers. And the funny thing is none of us could actually sing,
right?
So there's instrumental covers.
Yeah,
that's
kind of what Grain Belt was too when we first started. Not really covers, but like, nobody wanted to sing, and
yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it was like, yeah, let's have this band, but none of us want to sing because none of us could sing. But
you did eventually sing for
I did
stuff.
I did, yeah. So I mean, that was obviously later down the line, but early on, it was just us playing instrumental covers, and then there was a band. There was a bunch of kids that we also went to school with who were in a band called Nat Love, who were kind of, contemporaries, and we started playing like party shows with them, and they were way different than what we were doing. They were kind of like more on the funk type of vein, but we were friends with those guys, and so we started playing some shows with them, and then that eventually evolved into, once we started writing more original stuff, playing shows at like the Great River Roadhouse.
Yeah.
Somewhere else I'm forgetting here. It might have been
Roadhouse, probably Eagle Point shows.
Oh yeah. So I
guess Camp,
Yeah, I should have added that. So, at the time in the mid 90s, literally there was almost no place in Dubuque that a kid or a teenager could book a show.
Right.
And so Eagle Point Park had this weird thing where you could rent out their band shell, which was actually a pretty, like, all things considered, a pretty nice band shell.
It was.
And
it was relatively cheap from what I remember.
From what I remember, it was, I think it was somewhere, I think it was around $75.
Yeah.
And
under 100 for sure.
Yeah, under 100 for sure. And so one of the first shows that I ever actually quote unquote booked was a show out at the band shell.
Yeah.
And I took my birthday money, and that was the money I used to like put on this show. And it was us, Flux Capacitor, and then Nat Love, and then a band. I don't know if they were called this then, but a band called the Carpathians.
Yeah.
They played with us, and then there was one other band, but I'm spacing. It's not.
Yeah, we just were talking about the Carpathians a couple days ago.
Yeah, for whatever reason, they were a band that actually drew a lot of people, and so it's like, oh well, we'll put them with us, and we'll get people to the band show, and
yeah.
And then there was a store in town called Rondinelli that would rent out equipment to. He was very much a booster for the
George
for the kids for the kids in Dubuque, and he would rent out equipment to kids at below market price, and so we got the PA for that show for about $20, and then from there we could have this show and at least have it sound somewhat semi-professional.
Yeah, not that anyone knew how to work it, but
nobody knew how to work it. And I think even towards the last couple of shows I played in Dubuque before moving to Iowa City, it was always a thing where nobody knew how to work the sound equipment.
Well, that's an interesting actually point, because like nobody's actually brought up George on the show before, but yeah, he's responsible for a lot of shows actually going off in the early days. Or I don't know, there was probably shit going on before we were of age to make noise, but like, like he helped out a lot of kids, like you said. And
yeah, George was a huge booster for a lot of the people who went to his store.
Super supportive. Sometimes would even come out and like run it.
Yeah, sometimes would come out and run it.
Watch the shows.
There was a show in the basement of an American Legion hall that he actually came out to do the sound for. There was another store here called Uncle Ike's, and they had a lot of good equipment and whatnot, but my experience had been early on just, it was kind of hard to get them to kind of be into, I think that they were coming from a more professional standpoint.
Right.
So they weren't about, kids making a ton of noise in the band show.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas George was a little bit more open-minded, and George also had this interesting policy where, not with instruments, but with pedals, for instance, he would let you borrow it over the weekend, not pay anything. He would just let you borrow it, and if you were interested in buying it, you would obviously buy it the next Monday
or whatever, yeah.
And if not,
oh man, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
That was an interesting thing as a guitar, both learning bass and learning guitars, playing around with noises, and again, I can't stress enough that we were very lucky to have a basement space where we could play instead of having a garage where if it got cold.
Oh, absolutely.
So it was really easy to toy around and experiment with different things going on, and also at the time that would be right around there was Co-op, the record store, and they were getting really good records.
Yeah,
and everything. All of those things kind of dovetailed together, and I think that was an experience that wasn't obviously exempt to just me. There was other people, and meeting other people too. Friends. My experience was that Nick Kuz's older brother sort of made us listen to Dinosaur Jr. or Big Black or Soundgarden, stuff like that, and that's how I slowly got into that. But there's other people who got into it through, they heard Smells Like Teen Spirit and sort of like the kind of typical 90s, that's their entry point for it.
Right.
But
if you start digging a little bit, then you're like, okay, well, Kurt Cobain's into Melvins and
exactly. So everybody
puppets, shit like that.
Everybody kind of had their entry point at which they could start digging further if they wanted to.
Yeah, for sure.
And luckily, surprisingly, that there was sort of these these places in Dubuque that actually helped out a little bit, you know. And so, but to answer the initial question, Rondinelli's was super helpful in making sure that at least the band camp shows kind of went off without a hitch, From there, other people start, it's weird, sort of other people started doing shows, and we were sort of lucky enough at the time to either one of us was friends with somebody, one of us in the band was friends with somebody, because Kuz went to Hempstead, Nate and I went to Wahlert, and so we kind of were able to know some other people that we wouldn't typically know, and then we got thrown on, different battle of the bands and all that stuff. And
so it must have been one of those where we actually started playing together regularly, because I know, like, that is weird that, like, you guys were Wallert and, there were Hempstead people. Jim was Hempstead, me and Dave were senior, and we started Beneath around the same time as Flux Capacitor.
Yep.
And,
yep.
Yeah, and Moon Gadget too. Like, those guys, were like our buddies. And I talked to Bob about this actually on the episode he was on. Like, I don't remember exactly how we started hanging out with you guys, but like it just sort of happened, and we started always playing shows together, like that.
The U.S. Maple
Nativity show
the
that
Nativity show
that you did.
Yeah. So there was two
U.S. Maple show too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one.
So there was a girl who I went to school with at Wallert, and her name was Lisa Moots. She ran, every high school had sort of their, different clubs. She ran the Amnesty International club at Wallert.
Yeah. Okay.
And at some point, I'm not kind of sure the details, but she wanted to do a show to raise money for Amnesty International. And so she asked us to do it. And she asked Nat Love, who I was talking about before, to do it. And then they needed one other band. And I think that's when we asked you guys. Yeah. And so it was Beneath, Flux Capacitor, Nat Love. And that was actually, it's weird to think about it now, but there was like 200 people at that show.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't remember it that successfully at all.
Yeah, the first one was about, at least, if not 200, somewhere in 150. Like, there was a lot of people there.
I remember it being fun,
and I and sort of like, it's funny to think about then. You're like, oh, this is the ticket. I'm gonna be playing music the rest of my life. Well,
yeah.
Obviously.
People really like this.
People really like this. Yeah, and mostly it was just nobody had anything else to do.
We're talking 1994, Dubuque, Iowa. Yeah, there wasn't really much to do. Something like that, right? 94, 95.
I think it was actually 96, but regardless, I mean, there's cops out on the JFK Strip. Let's do this instead. I mean, it was but like I said, that was sort of the, like, other people are going to do shows now, and like, to get like Nativity, which was, they had this just like really old school Catholic gym. To have the show was pretty cool at the time, and
for sure.
But yeah, that was
a nice room too. It sounded really good from what I remember.
Yeah, it was really loud. And then after the fact, there was sort of this thing where I don't know. I can't speak to anybody else, but it was like, oh well, there's these established bands in Dubuque now. I mean. At the time,
established.
Yeah, at the time it makes sense, but
no, for sure.
And then
and to say nothing of like the before any of us even started bands and we were just like sort of talking about it. There was the Puppets. I remember. You remember them?
Yeah.
And they were doing like what seemed to us like successful, performing and touring and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like looking back on it now, they probably like maybe did exactly what we were doing and like setting up shows themselves.
Yeah,
but they had a seat. I remember they had a tape, and me and Jim and a bunch of us all had that. Like,
well, yeah, it was
that seems like a success to me.
Well, it was too at the time. You kind of have to think about it in the sense of size.
Yeah.
Then to now, when we were in high school, there was. Kids that were older than us that were playing in bands. There was these kids from Galena who were playing in bands, and it seemed like, wow, they're probably playing all these shows. I don't know if they played any shows,
but it probably not.
it seemed in your in your mind's eye like, oh, they're probably playing tons of shows just because they're older, and so that kind of pushed you to, play or to try and do something on that scale, even though it probably never happened.
Absolutely,
and kind of at the same time that this is all going on, the independent music scene in America is sort of becoming more and more popularized. Bands that at the time seemed so kind of mysterious are becoming more and more like, oh, the Jesus Lizard are actually real guys. Thanks to media and whatnot. And that's sort of around the same time as the internet.
Right.
So, But right around the time of the Jamnesty show, that's when there started to be like at least once a month there was some sort of show in Dubuque.
Yeah.
And it seemed so weird the first, sort of 3 years that I was musically conscious, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of a sudden, like there's actually stuff to do.
Yeah.
And there's people doing it, and we got to be a part of it too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you can actually, it's not like out of the question for you to do it yourself either. Like it's not that hard.
Exactly. So if you wanted to book a show for whatever reason, you just say, "Hey, I'm going to book this show."
I just thought of something like where my early days crossed with the like I said, the Puppets. It was like sort of shortly after the Puppets were disbanded or whatever. I don't know what happened to them. And I was still in Burnt Toast, but it was almost the end of it. We were playing the band shell at Eagle Point. It might have been one of the Funk Fests. Adrian Funk set
That's
up
right.
a couple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So it might have been the first one of those. And Burnt Toast was playing, and then Andy Benson and I had started playing, just fucking around in Luke Bandy's basement, playing with Luke Bandy. You remember him?
Yep.
So we started playing some of his originals, and I'm doing quotation fingers. We performed as Butt Crunch. Were you at that show?
I don't know. Butt Crunch is not a
backdrop.
name that stuck with me.
Oh, it didn't stick with me either. But actually, it wouldn't have stuck with me if it wasn't for this particular instance. We were playing, and Brian Freisinger and Brian Meyer,
Okay. Yep.
both from the Puppets,
Yep.
were in the audience, and Luke was singing for this band, which was definitely the wrong move because guy couldn't sing. I used to call him one man bandy because he could play everything, but really, really like marginally.
I don't think I had to come out and say this right now is that I don't really think that there was anybody in Dubuque that could sing while we were, in that period of time.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, there was people could play, but nobody could sing.
Arb, Andy Benson sang. Whether or not it was pleasant to anybody, he definitely, I don't know. He could sing. It's just I don't know. I don't know if he had the voice that he thought he had.
There was a proliferation of really great drummers in Dubuque, and there was no singers whatsoever.
Yeah, and now it's like the opposite.
Oh,
I
really?
understand. Yeah, everyone thinks they can sing, and
You've killed all the other drummers in Dubuque.
yeah, well, no, not really. I'm actually not even playing drums that much these days.
Well, bongos.
Right. Well, yeah, I've kind of taken up with bongos, but
Yeah.
no, that's a joke. I'm not doing that.
Thanks for clarifying for me. But so going back.
What I was going to say, though, yeah, exactly, is so those two were in the audience. Maybe all the Puppets were. I don't know. But I remember Brian was there because that was like around the time I met Jim and Brian Meyer. And Brian Freisinger was there because Renee, his sister, would come to all, she was a buddy, and she would always come to all those things. And Luke, like we were playing all these songs that Luke had apparently written, and then like maybe one or two covers, I don't remember. But like he's like, okay, here's another original or whatever. And he launched into this song that I guess he tried out for the Puppets and played with them like maybe for one show or whatever. And he stole one of their songs. It was called the Spleen Song, and he taught it to us. And he told us that it was theirs, or that it was his. So we started playing it, and then we show up to this fucking show, and he's like, "Here's another original." And fucking as soon as we launch into it, like Brian and Brian both recognized it, and they had a bucket of chicken that they were eating while watching the show, and they started whipping chicken at Luke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. I forgot about that until just now.
Well, one of the things that's really funny to me to think about is before I ever started playing with Nick and Nate.
Yeah.
Was that I just wanted to play music. It didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so when an opportunity would arise, I would take it, and sometimes regretfully. There was a dude I went to high school with, who was about 2 years older than me, and he said something about, I saw you were wearing this cool T-shirt. That was the thing. I went to Catholic school, so we'd have like once every 2 months we'd get to wear whatever we wanted, and so I'd wear like the best band T-shirt I had, which most likely would be something really shitty. But regardless, I like that T-shirt. You want to play music? Cool, man. And this dude was a total metalhead.
Okay.
And so
you were not a metalhead at this point.
I mean, I grew up with metal.
Okay.
But I wasn't. I mean, I was up.
You were exploring other options.
I was up at that time. I was probably obnoxiously into Pavement. So
okay.
Anyway, a
lot of Pavement fans are obnoxiously into Pavement. So.
Exactly. Well, I actually grew up, but long story short, Did
you though?
Not really. Me and this other guitar player, who I kind of recruited him into it because I didn't want to go over there alone. We went over there to his place, and he lived out by Asbury, and we were in his basement, like of his parents' place, and so like this very, still very 80s basement, and I'm 15 years old, and he goes, "Do you want to do a couple rails before we start jamming?"
Oh shit!
And I didn't even, at the time, it didn't even register. I mean, that didn't make any sense to me. And I was
like it was skateboarding or something.
Yeah, right. You want to do a rail slide really quick? You want to do some skating before we start jamming? But so what's that? He's like, "Oh, you want to do some coke?" Like, no. And so this guy just broke out a bunch of lines, did like 4 lines, and then started, sweating and jamming in front of us, and we weren't allowed to play at all.
Wow.
He was just showing us.
Do you remember this guy's name?
I do, but I'm not going to say it over there.
Okay.
Because I think he might be a respected citizen in Dubuque now. So,
oh man, you got to tell me after that.
I will tell you afterward. It's not a problem. But like I said, it was all trial and error. It was like, well, you play music. Let's try and get together. And I mean, 75% of the time it was total dog shit. But
of course.
But
once in a while though.
Every once in a while, and talking about looking for shows. I mean, there was a point in time where it was like just to find somewhere that would let kids play music was, you thought you struck gold. And
for sure.
I remember being with Nate and some other people, and I remember when all the kids would go out to the Mustang Ranch.
Yeah.
Do you remember that place?
No.
Okay, it was a place out on the highway, going west on 20, and it was right by a truck stop, and it was like this sort of old style looking saloon.
Mustang Ranch. Holy shit. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember this at all.
And so we went out there, and obviously, even now, like I'm not that great of a dancer, and so I just kind of stood there and looked at the girls.
Yeah.
And I remember looking around, and they had this beautiful, beautiful Fender Jaguar just hanging up on the wall. This guitar, and I just kept like staring at it the entire night. And one of the guys who worked there was like, "Hey man, you like that guitar?" Like, "Yeah, dude, that's a beautiful guitar. Beautiful guitar." I was like, Yeah, it's my guitar. I play in some bands. Oh, cool. And then we started...
Want to do some rails?
Yeah, I want to do some rails, yeah. But we started talking about music, and I kind of said, I play in this band, and we keep trying to find places to play. He's like, "Oh, yeah, maybe we should do some stuff out here at the Mustang Ranch, That'd be cool."
He was placing the name of the place into your conversation.
Yeah, he's like, so, and that seemed like to make a lot of sense because that's where all of the kids at the time would go.
Yeah.
And, to have somebody who was into that, okay. And so he's like, "Well, let's do this. Why don't you, he's like, "I got a band too." He didn't say the name of his band.
Oh, no.
He's like, I got a band too. Why don't you come down to our practice space and you guys rehearse and we see if there's a match. Oh, okay, cool. So their practice space was down in that sort of warehouse district where the Calmus's hang time is now.
Yeah.
And I remember...
Millwork district now, where like Brazen is and stuff.
Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for whatever reason, we couldn't convince Coos to come down. So it was just me and Nate. So I'm thinking in my head, just the bass player and the drummer are going down here to rehearse. This is going to be terrible. But we did it anyway because you're already locked into it.
Fuck it.
And we go down there, and these guys are we go into their practice space, and it's actually a room similar to this. The only difference is instead of stacks of Hustler like we have in this room right now, there's there's stacks of Penthouse magazine.
Okay.
And they have this fridge, and they have these Budweiser signs up everywhere, and on the wall where they practice, right?
Yeah.
Like behind where they practice is a silk screened Bad Attitude, and it's BADD Attitude.
That's their band, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's their band. So we get down there, and it's just this weird thing where we're sort of sitting. We don't know what we've gotten ourselves into.
Yeah.
And I think the best course of action seemed at the time to have a beer and look at Penthouse with them. And so that's what we did. And then they're like, play a song. So Nate and I played a song through their gear, and it was terrible. There is no other way to put it. And they're like, we were about to start another song, and the guys, look, let us take care of that. So they start jamming, and I look at Nate just like, oh, dude, we have to get out of here. It made Slaughter look like Slayer. So it was so bad, and I think on the way out, Nate tried to take a Penthouse with him, and it didn't work out. But regardless at the time, like I was saying before, is that you were just looking for somewhere to play, and anything seemed like I have to at least go down this avenue to see if we can make it work.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Half the time it was blind alleys, and you would end up in bad attitude situations. But it made for funny stories after the fact. But so around that same time is when you started having those shows out at the Roadhouse, and it seemed at least that there was actually sort of this sort of music scene bubbling up in Dubuque.
Yeah.
And it was all these kids for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about the Funk Fest. I remember those.
Yep.
And I grew up with Adrian, and you had Beneath, and you had us, and you had the Carpathians, you had Nat Love, you had a band called I might totally kill this, Amsterdam Dream. Am I remember that?
Yeah, that was Adrian's band.
Okay, Amsterdam Dream. You had a bunch of these other bands that were kind of
Acceptable Fizz. Remember them?
Yep.
Sean Chambers' band.
So you had all these.
They were all right, from what I remember.
Yeah, I
don't know. They were probably terrible from, based on now, but whatever.
But it's like I said, it seemed at the time that there was actually, not only was there these shows happening, but there was people in the community who, for the first time in a long time, were supporting that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a kid thing.
Right.
And that's sort of when you're that age, it seems like, oh, well, let's make something of this.
For sure.
Not realizing that, most likely in 2 years, that's all going to disappear just because of the natural progression of being a kid. You graduate from high school and 75% of the people leave.
Yeah.
And so.
But that's true. That's important, especially how we made it somehow scan all three high schools.
Yeah. I mean, every high school had like a group of bands, and even I think there was another band from Waller that was younger than us, and I'm having trouble remembering what their name was, but yeah, it just seemed.
Would it have been Stub, like Rolling and Luxatich's first band, or was that way later? I can't remember.
It might have been them, but I think there was a band, because those guys are a little bit younger than me. But there was a band that was about a year younger than us. I'm trying to remember what their name is, and it's completely my mind's completely blanking. It doesn't matter at this point, but yeah, at the time, it just there was a lot of things going on, and there was people who were actually supporting it, and it was completely strange if you had actually grown up in having grown up in Dubuque, and when there was a time where kids were not the loved parts of this town, you know what I mean,
for sure.
And so. To actually give voice to that was a pretty interesting thing. And then, of course, the shows at the Roadhouse or the Armory too. I mean, those were sort of instrumental in pushing everything forward. And then, at some point in time, the flux capacitor thing and the Nat Love thing and all of that, I mean, all of us in those particular bands, I mean, those guys, the Nat Love guys sort of stuck around, but there came a point where we were always playing shows together and we were getting these really good turnouts, at least at the, for the time, for the place. And it was like, wow, this is kind of a thing, and there was a guy here who worked at the coffee shop Take 5 is what it was called.
Yep, Now Monks,
yeah. So there's a guy who worked there. His name was Don Clark. And
I know Don.
I sort of had randomly met him because I had been working at Co-op, which is now obviously Moondog, but he had came in to buy a bunch of Stereolab CDs, and I worked at Moondog or Co-op, whatever, and he worked at Take 5, and we just started talking about music, and he was really into DJ culture.
Yeah.
And we sort of bonded over that because I was starting to listen to more like that type of music, and he started buying into like all these kids playing music.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I mean,
sure.
he was an adult, so he could actually book shows that were maybe harder for us to get.
And buy beer.
And buy beer, yep, and buy beer. And so he booked this show at the American Legion, which at the time wouldn't let kids book because that they had a show, that Guzzard show. One of the old timers upstairs had heard the word fuck. And so
is that what happened? I didn't know that.
Yeah, one of the old timers had heard the word fuck, and so because of that, there was going to be no music in the basement.
Wow. Okay.
And somehow I don't remember Don was able to circumvent that, and then had this show down there. And he was a big backer of all of these bands.
Yeah.
And our band and the Nat Love guys. He was really into all that, and so that was a really sort of positive push. But again, by that point in time, I think we were all sort of graduating from high school, and
so it was almost too little, too late.
It was almost too little, too late. And I remember a time where Flux Capacitor played a show with Calvin Crime out at the Roadhouse.
Yeah, I remember that show.
And the Calvin Crime guys really liked us, and the dude from Calvin Crime said, "Well, let's do a tour together."
Like Tillman?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Who shot on whatever.
Harmar Superstar?
Harmar Superstar. And we, 17-year-old kids, like, we're going to go on tour? Oh, man.
Right.
And so I called him up and said, he gave me his phone number to call him, and I called him up, and he goes, yeah, let's do this tour. You need to call the clubs, all this stuff. And so I went back to those guys, and just the idea of having to sell... And at that point, we had Chris Stefani was playing guitar with us at that point, but having to sell them on like doing a tour, which I mean, he was talking about a cross country tour, a bunch of 17-year-olds and one 19-year-old in a van together. It just didn't seem like a thing that was going to happen.
Most of you ready to leave for college and shit anyway. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, Coos was going to Iowa State, Nate was going to Drake, and then both Chris was moving to Iowa City. I was going to school. And so it just didn't seem like a thing that was probably going to happen. Yeah. And so we kind of set our sights on recording a record. And that was pretty much about it. I think we played a bunch of shows in Dubuque up until we recorded our record, and we recorded with Steve Cray, who who
of course.
And
Nat Love alum,
and now he's still
a pretty big time recording.
He is,
engineer, whatever. He records Charles Bradley, and
I'd like to think that he got his start trying to get my bass tone correct on that record. But
so is that record out there still? How many did you make? I don't think I have one.
Well, so that's kind of what happened, is that we recorded it, and we it was kind of a thing where me and Nate and Chris recorded our parts of it, and then we had to wait for Coos to record his parts of it.
Okay.
Because I think, I don't know, he had a job or something like that, and he came in.
What a dick!
What a dick! Yeah, he recorded 2 songs.
Yeah.
And then I came back in and did the rest. And at some point there was talk like, let's do some CDs or whatnot. And again, we were all in college, and at that point it was like, does anybody really care?
Yeah.
You know, is there any real, I mean, beyond us? I mean, we all have like copies of the tape, but
So it just kind of got buried?
yeah, it just kind of got buried. I mean, and you know, it never really came up after that. You know, I mean, we'd see each other, and that stuff never came up. And so it kind of seemed like, well, if you're not going to talk about it and I'm not going to talk about it, do we really care? And so, and you know, was there an audience for that? Maybe when we were still living in Dubuque, but I don't think so. So I think it, you know, if you took the time to dig around my mom's basement, you might find it. But
Yeah.
I mean, beyond
you have
that,
the master somewhere.
yeah, it's somewhere, but I don't have any like sort of interest in it
Right.
beyond what it is. So
Well, I'd like to hear it sometime.
yeah, you know,
But I'm not going to like put a bunch of work into hearing it.
no, exactly. I mean, I guess that's the thing is that like in the end, it's interesting more to me to think about like how that sort of period of time affected what came later. But do I have any interest in hearing any of it? Not particularly.
Right, for sure.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's not so much that I don't like that or whatever, but
I think at least toward the end of Flux Capacitor 2 was when you and I tried our first foray into playing together in the same band,
correct. Yep.
which was dubbed Desacorde.
Yeah.
Right?
Some brutally pretentious name that yeah.
That's definitely something you came up with. Because I was still, well, let's call it fucking dark face or something.
Eyes with Tears or something like that.
No, Eyes with Tears.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it was probably incredibly pretentious.
No, but whatever. I mean, I don't really remember anything about it. I just remember we played one of those Jamnesty shows because, like, we needed one more fucking band or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think what that was that...
It was me, you, and Jim, right?
It was me, you, Jim, and Dave Hansen.
Oh, so it was Beneath plus Jeremy.
Yeah, it was Beneath plus Jeremy, and I think what it was that Jamnesty needed... There was another Jamnesty, and this would have been after I like graduated high school.
Yeah, 97, 98.
Yeah, there was one more Jamnesty, and they needed another band, and I didn't really have so much a band as just a collection of songs. And I think I talked to you, and you said, "Okay, let's do something." And we did it, and I mean that was sort of the start of.
Was it cool? Is what I like. I don't remember anything about it. I just remember I have the flyer.
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
I remember we did it. I just don't remember.
That was
it had to have been a nightmare. It was probably.
I don't recall it being a nightmare because I can remember every Nightmare show.
Okay, cool.
I can remember every Nightmare show like it's yesterday, but I have no recollection of the shows that were great.
Okay, good.
But that was like kind of the start for me, at least, of really wanting to sort of do bands that, at least for a little bit, like did one show and that was it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a big thing for with you.
I really had sort of.
Sometimes you would book the show before the band was even formed.
that did happen a couple times. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but for me, like I really enjoyed kind of coming up with something sort of in the moment, as it were.
Yeah.
And it would work. I mean, I played more than a few bands with Bob Bucko, where it was just one of those things where let's just go in on the fly, the two of us and some other people, and wing it. Yeah. And it would work sometimes, and it would be painfully bad other times. To the point where I think we did one at the band shell, Eagle Point Park, and the drummer from the band Stub wanted to kill either Bob or myself. He couldn't decide which one. So, those things, at the time they were good for me to like kind of learn more about my playing. And come up with. I mean, that's another hilarious thing. Is like, I'm just going to come up with a flyer show and build the band.
I think that's hilarious.
Build the band around the flyer, and that sort of seemed at the time like more interesting to me than sitting down and saying, let's game out a set over a period of, over a period of a year, and then play our first show.
Yeah.
Which later on, obviously, that's something I did do. But
yeah.
at the time for me, it was like, let's start a band and let's call it, Mother Teresa's Asshole, and we're gonna play a bunch of acoustic songs that we're gonna come up with on the spot, and that's gonna be what it is. I mean, was it good?
Right.
I don't know. I don't really care, and I know I had fun. So never at the expense of anybody else, I don't think. But
well, when you moved to Iowa City, what was the next band that was actually like a working band?
Yeah. So when I moved to Iowa City, Chris Stefani was already there, who I had played with, in Flux Capacitor, and he and I kind of started playing together almost right out of the gate when I got down there, and then we played with. At the time, there was a bass player who lived on my floor in the dorms, and we kind of did this sort of. We worked on it, at least. I don't think anything ever really came of it, but worked on this sort of like keyboards and 2-guitar type of deal. And both Chris and Bob were actually very instrumental in me sort of maturating between being a bass player into playing guitar and playing it well, and sort of they came from two different schools, and that's sort of where I sort of learned is in the breach of that.
Yeah.
And so that band was kind of formed when I got down to Iowa City, and then if I remember correctly, the bass player / keyboard player went on to play in a emo band down there, sort of like a Braid type of. I mean, that's the direction he wanted to go, and neither Chris nor myself were gonna go in that direction. And so,
you guys ain't pussies.
Yeah,
no, I'm just joking.
We both have diaries, but
yeah, so you are.
Yeah, but long story short, from there, we still kind of played off and on, but I had got a job working in the cafeteria at Burge, which is a dorm in Iowa City, and I met a girl who was working there. Her name was Robin Strickland, and she said something like "nice Modest Mouse shirt," and we started talking about music, and turned out she played drums, and she had a bass player she had a boyfriend, excuse me. I should have said boyfriend first, bass player second, but he was a bass player who was also her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And they had been playing with this guy who was in law school down there, and it wasn't working out, or something along those lines. He was too busy. I don't think it was anything. He was too busy.
Okay.
And we talked about playing together, and I started playing with them, and we gelled, and then we kind of talked about adding another person to the band, and that's when I brought in Chris, and so we started. Sort of practicing pretty regularly at the time.
Yeah.
And sort of writing from there. And so
when you were in Burge.
Long story short, Robin and I and Chris started playing. And there was two Chris's. There was Chris the bass player, Chris Stefani, and we started playing. And then I think we might have had a show booked.
Okay.
Our first show was at One Flight Up, I think, here in Dubuque.
Oh, in Dubuque. Okay.
Yeah, and it was with what would eventually become 10 Grand, Vita Blue.
Right. And this band that you're in would eventually become Auto Crash. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And out of nowhere, Chris Stefani just vanished off the face of the planet.
What do you mean?
I mean, he was still in Iowa City, but we would call. I would
return calls and stuff.
Yeah, I would call him. Robin would call him, and just disappeared. And so
I never knew this.
Yeah, so we were stuck without a guitar player, and I had gone to high school with Bob, and I mentioned, I think he might be free, which was probably an understatement at the time, and so. I ended up...
We're talking 2000...
No.
2001?
No, we're talking probably 98, fall of 98.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 99, but... So I called him up and said, "Hey, would you want to try and do this?" Or something along those lines. And our first practice was actually in his parents' basement. We came up to Dubuque and played in his parents' basement, and it clicked.
Love that basement.
Love that basement. Yeah, great basement. Lots of Loris trophies down there. So,
Yep.
I mean, but it clicked, and from there, we played our first show, and then Bob went to Cornell, I think, in
Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon, and so he was at least nearby enough to practice. And so from there, that band started to sort of gel and became eventually Autocrash, and we played several a bunch of shows, and yeah, I mean that was sort of a time when there was the Autocrash, or we weren't Autocrash at the time, but we eventually settled on that name. But that was sort of a
So you were even Autocrash the whole time that Stefani was in the band?
no, I mean I think at the time there was several different names that
Okay.
I was never allowed to name.
This is a history that I actually haven't heard.
I was never allowed to name the band, so I mean, make of that what you will. I should never be allowed to name bands.
Okay.
But
Didn't you come up with Chubby Cox?
I did come up with Chubby Cox. Yeah, that was another erstwhile project.
So maybe that wasn't such an unwise idea.
No. So, but anyway, so that I think for a while the name was Charmander was the name, which was Robin and Chris were really into Pokemon. Chris, the bass player, not Chris Stefani, were really into Pokemon. So we had the name Charmander for a while. And I think we might have played a show at Jonesy's in Solon.
Okay.
But I mean, we played shows with a lot of great bands, and we got to
Great pork tea at Jonesy's, by the way.
That's sort of what they're famous for.
Yeah.
But eventually, at some point in time, like the name evolved into Autocrash, and I mean that's what that band was.
That's much better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's much
Adult
better.
people that are into Pokemon, it's irritating.
I mean, even college students that are into Pokemon are somewhat suspect. So,
yeah.
But those guys, both Chris and Robin, had connections in Columbia, Missouri, and so we played there, and we got very close to the people down there. And they were very supportive, and they had some pretty great bands. And there was a band called The Jerk. There's another band called Catalina, I believe, who we played shows with.
Okay.
And one of my favorite, if I can share with you, Bob stories occurred
Please.
in Columbia, Missouri.
Please, I love Bob stories.
So we played this show at this punk house where Robin and Chris had sort of come from there or whatever, and we played pretty early on. So we drove down in Chris's old beater, and I don't remember. We played, and then Bob disappeared.
Yeah.
And there was an upstairs that was actually the downstairs was a shithole, but they had this very nice living room with these old kind of ornate bookshelves built in.
Okay.
And a collection of books and whatnot. And at one time I came upstairs to find Bob, and I come upstairs and I find Bob, and
I know the story.
he's splayed out on the couch and he looks like a mess. There's books everywhere. And he has Jules' book of poetry split in half on his chest. And I look at him and I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I've taken enough sleeping pills to kill a horse, and I still can't fall asleep." And so from then on, it was on after that, I guess. It's the best way to put it.
I love you, Bob.
But
That's one of my favorite stories of all time.
I doubt I'll ever be able to forget just Jules' book of poetry.
It's my favorite part. It's
ripped in half on his chest. I mean, he obviously did not like her syntax or something. So that was that.
That must have got you in some hot water with Robin's friends, though.
I think they were able to smooth it out eventually.
Okay,
but
I'm gonna just have
not.
this. Come on, you're not even done yet.
We'll split it.
All right, fine.
So I mean that band, we did an EP with this guy Bradley Adida, who had a zine called A Day in the Air. We did an EP called Go Pill Popper Go, and I think we tried to pay him in beer, but he was straight edge. So, but
A little laughing noise is coming from the corner.
But long story short, so we did that. We did a bunch of shows around that time, and then I would have left the band in June of 2000, somewhere around there, I think. And then I mean, my memory's not so good, but broke up somewhere in the next year.
Okay.
So, but
Was it 2001 that we formed Mail Bomb?
no.
I think it was.
Was it? I don't know. I mean, it could have been. I mean,
It was the summer. Fuck. Okay, so it was a summer. I think it was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, because we
Hold on one second. We should bring Bob in for another auto crash story.
well, clearly he doesn't want to.
Clearly, he doesn't want to.
I remember being in Iowa City, hanging out. I had just let Jim. Oh wait, maybe it was 2002.
Yeah, I think it was 2002 because I actually didn't play music for about, I want to say it was close to a year.
Yeah.
After Auto Crash or whatever. Like I didn't really. I mean I played music in so much as had a guitar around. I would play on that, but I didn't really play with anybody else.
But I know. Okay. I'm pretty sure I was living on Van Buren in that fucking basement apartment.
I don't think you ever let anybody come over to your place. I think you were embarrassed.
Not that one, because yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so here's why I think it was 2001, because I moved in. I was just sort of staying on my ex-girlfriend Rachel's couch, but not really couch.
Couch bed.
Yeah, I was staying with my ex, and another mutual friend of mine and Jim's, Mark Nielsen, was moving out of this basement apartment on Van Buren, and he said, it's cheap, like these people have a house, it's like two couples, and then the basement is like a full apartment. It's got a kitchen, it's got a bathroom, whatever, and it was cheap for Iowa City. It was cheap. It was like $300. So I'm like, okay, I'll take it. So I moved in that. And then within months, it was 2002.
Yeah.
It was 2002.
See,
because 2001, I remember I was still at Rachel's house. When.
So I think Mail Bomb occurred because what had happened was I had in 2001 I had been living with another person from Dubuque, and that person sort of lost their marbles and had to move back to Dubuque. And then I was sort of scrambling to look for a place.
Yeah.
And I ended up, this dude I used to work with said, hey, move in with me and my buddies. And I moved in, not realizing when I moved in that they were actually dechartered frat guys. Their frat had been dechartered for stealing from the March of Dimes.
No shit.
Yeah. And so, like literally the first day I moved my stuff in, one of the guys, I was like, hey, I'm Jeremy. He's like, yeah, man, what's up? I'm C-Style. And I'm like, I looked at him like, I'm Jeremy? He said, yeah, man, I'm C-Style. What's up? I'm like, all right, this is what's going to happen to me. So I stayed.
This is what's going to happen to me.
Yeah. So I stayed there for about like 6 months, and that seemed in that time to be like, I could probably chalk that up to being one of the worst times of my life. And I was in school, I wasn't playing music at all. And then I think Bob had moved into the old Auto Crash house where we used to practice.
Okay.
And it just kind of sort of hit the living with the frat guys hit sort of a wall. And I called up Bob and asked him, hey man, like, do you guys have an open spot at the old Auto Crash house? And they did, and I moved in, and
that was the place on.
Yeah, the place.
What the hell was it? not Benton, but
what place is it, Bob? What's the street? Bowery House.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they had,
and then we played in the basement.
That's right. So I mean, there was a basement there, and it seems sort of like, well, there's a basement here, and there's gear, and play music again. And so I don't really recall how any of it sort of came about, but the Chubby Cox thing actually happened, I guess, right before I moved out of that frat house. I had said to Bob something about like Nate Lewis was going to be in town. I had been talking with Chris. Do you want to do this show at the Theta Beta Potato House? Mm-hmm. And he said, we talked about it, like, yeah, let's, 1 day practice, I think it was. And we played this show at the Theta Beta Potato House as Chubby Cox. And
Okay.
that was more of like one of those things where it's literally a poster band.
Yeah, of course. You're just having fun, whatever.
Exactly. And we played our set, and then after our set, this girl came up to me and goes, "Oh man, you guys are so good. Mm-hmm. You sound like Godspeed You Black Emperor."
Oh yeah. That's right.
No. But shortly there, like literally probably within 2 weeks, that's when I moved out of the dechartered frat house.
Yeah.
And in with those guys, it was amalgamation of several different people in this auto crash, or the old auto crash house. And I don't really think that any of those people actually like fully interacted with each other on a day-to-day basis. But
yeah.
But that's where the mail bomb thing started. And I think what happened is that I may have talked to Bob about playing, and then I talked to you about playing, and it just sort of made sense. And
yep. Jim was still staying in my house at the time, so
but I think
you want to just play.
Yeah, but at the same time, once again, it was one of those things where like I was going to be moving to Chicago, at the end of the summer, and I think Bob might have been moving to Portland.
Yeah, it was never going to be like a long-term thing.
Yeah, it was never, but it was weird.
You definitely booked a show like, before we had really played any notes.
Yeah, I mean, it was never going to be a long-term thing, but it was weird that in the time that it took to get ready for that show, there was actually some pretty decent music that was written. I mean,
absolutely.
Live, it was a complete disaster for the most part.
Well, that's because I have a feeling it's because, and I'll cop to my part of it. We got pretty drunk before that show.
Yeah, that's putting it
we
mildly.
all did. Yeah. I mean, I remember hanging out like what the fuck was that place? The Atlas.
Was it the Atlas?
Yeah, we went to the Atlas beforehand. The four of us, and did shots and like whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the thing that, like, at least to me, is that was a band that had a little bit of potential to do.
Yeah, there could have been for sure some really rad shit if we would have stuck it out.
Yeah, but to me, at the same time, you can say that, and I mean, we probably would have ended up all hating each other. I mean, there was always, probably not.
It's hard to say. Yeah,
but I do.
All were destined to stay in Iowa City for any longer, then who knows what would have happened. But I mean, I ended up moving to Mount Vernon for a little while because I got a place with my brother. Sorry.
It's nice to have like the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
Like we're sort of. Oh yeah, the penis gallery. No, I mean, again.
Yeah, we all moved. I mean, like Jim just took over my next apartment in Coralville, and then I moved to Mount Vernon. You moved to. You said I didn't know that you were moving to Chicago, but
yeah, that's where I went to, and I mean, at the time, I guess that's the thing is like, it's sort of. At the time, it was like, oh, maybe I remember thinking to myself, oh, maybe I shouldn't move to Chicago. I should stick this band out. And I was like, you know what?
After that first show, we all went to the Fox Head and we're like, yeah, we're not going to do that again, right?
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it again, like that was a band that happened, and I think that like I wish more bands occurred like that, where it's just like we're going to do this one thing, and that's going to be what it is, instead of this. Well, we're gonna do this one thing, and then it's gonna keep happening, and then we're gonna quit doing it, and then 5 years later we're gonna do it again.
Yeah,
as a reunion type of thing. It's like I like that there's certain bands that just happened in this one period of time, and that's all they were.
Right.
You know, they weren't any more, they weren't any less, and I don't really have any feelings about it one way or the other. You know,
of course.
If I heard it again, I might be like, what? You know, bass synth on guitar? What the? But
that's Atomic Dustbin cover?
No, it's Atomic Dustbin cover. Yeah, exactly. But beyond listening to it one more time, like it wouldn't be much of a thing for me. So, yep.
Well, after that, you shortly after that anyway went to Denver. I shortly after that came back to Dubuque. And that's, you know, sort of since then, 2002, 2003-ish, is when, you know, things started sort of, I don't know, maybe more aggressively started growing in Dubuque here. And like you said at the beginning of the show, you've gotten to sort of see that as an outsider, you know, who like having come from Dubuque, you know, early on and then moving away and sort of stepping back and looking at that. How do you feel that this town, you know, in terms of arts and music culture has progressed over the years?
Well, I guess to me, there was always sort of in the back of my mind that like if something didn't work out in some way or another, well, I'll just go back to Dubuque.
Yeah.
And not like that was ever like sort of a pleasant thing for me to think about, but
well, especially you know, at that point in the early 2000s where, you know, like maybe it wasn't all happening yet, but like yeah, it might be sort of still back in the back of your mind like I don't want to go back to the place that I left.
Well, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is like when I moved to Chicago, in the back of my head it was like, well, if this doesn't work out, like I can always move back to Dubuque, and it was sort of like a begrudging thing, you know? What I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Whereas,
how long did you live in Chicago?
Year and a half,
okay,
about. But in my mind, it was like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll move back to Dubuque, you know. And I, you know, sort of bombed out myself in Chicago, and I came back to Dubuque actually for one day. I didn't call anybody. I came back to Dubuque for one day. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go back to Iowa City, gonna figure it out and go from there. But now the thing for me was when I moved to Denver, it was like I actually started thinking like maybe like Dubuque would be somewhere where I would want to end up eventually, because what I saw happening from afar, and it was like, oh, well, there's actually, you know, there's, you know, actual shows, you know, going on more often. I give Haefel a lot of credit, like for starting to build up shows from the bottom up, you know, and then that sort of like branched out into other people doing shows, you know, and not like that's a prerequisite for anywhere I live, but it just a lot of things changed in the interim, and then sort of the actual turning the focus more and more. And I've seen that I guess in the last, you know, 5 years, is turning the focus more on the art scene that is in Dubuque and trying to keep. Because, I mean, there are a ton of great artists who have actually come out of this town. And I think a lot of them aren't here, you know, because they felt at the time it was what it was.
Exactly.
But it's not that way. And I feel like more people are staying because there is sort of a workable art scene. And there's people who are supporting that, who are giving sort of credence to that in a way. In a way that wasn't there when I was growing up at all. And it's definitely, there's been times, you know, where we've talked about like, would it make sense for us to like move back? And is that something that we would like to do? And you know, whereas, you know, 10 years ago I would say absolutely not. Now it's like, man, if we could just get a job that's workable for us, that'd be really cool.
Yeah. And you know, that aspect of the town is changing too. There are jobs being added, jobs being taken away too sometimes. I don't know. IBM moved here. It seems like everybody that works at IBM is really insufferable, but that's just me. And I've never worked there, so.
Yeah, well, but
mostly, like, all of a sudden, like, 2 blocks away is Monks, so they're all coming to Monks, and they're all, whatever.
But at the same time, all of that aside is that, like, you know, over the last 10 years, I have not been anywhere near Dubuque, and I mean, I've come back, obviously, but I've not, like, lived near here at all.
Yeah.
And, I get the question that comes up a lot. It's like, oh, so where are you from? And I say Dubuque. And over a period of time, I've actually seen it where it's been like, are you racist? To where it's like, oh man, that's a really cool town. There's a lot of stuff going on. And that's a real thing that's happened. And even when we were living in Los Angeles, I mean, I'd meet people from Iowa. Oh, Dubuque. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some cool. And it's like, oh, well, finally, because that's sort of always been there.
That's good to know.
That's sort of always been there.
And you're right. Yeah, it has.
But it hasn't been until recently that it's actually like the town has actually stepped away from. I mean, obviously the old vanguard's there, but it is what it is now,
Mm-hmm.
And
oh yeah, they're definitely still there.
yeah, I mean,
some of them are our parents' friends. Whatever. You can't shake those people. But
at the same time, I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that like this, this city has actually like there's a lot of interesting things going on, and it's not like there's only the one game in town like there used to be. There's all these other things that are happening, and that takes more than just actually booking a touch and go band at a roadhouse somewhere far away. It takes a lot of effort for a lot of people to make that a thing and to continue that. I mean, it would be easy to say like I've been ramming my head against the wall over and over and over again, and I'm tired of it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's people who are still doing it. So
true. Okay, and now you're in Denver.
Yeah. Move.
And you're occasionally hooking up shows for guys like me and guys like I know VC shows coming up that you helped at least, right?
No, I didn't help with the VC show at all. I booked shows in Denver from about 2009 to 2013.
Okay. One of which was an Old Panther show, I remember.
Old Panther.
For some reason I thought you had a hand in the VC show. But.
I pointed them in the direction of somebody that could actually do them some good.
Okay. Gotcha.
Which was not me. So but yeah, no, I booked shows there for about I guess 2009 to 2013, so close to 4 years.
Yeah.
And
do you consider Denver your home now?
I consider Denver a nice place to live, but my home, I mean, that could be anywhere. I guess I'm in a lucky position, and my girlfriend's in a lucky position where we can kind of determine that when we want to determine that. But right now, yeah, I mean, we have a backyard. That's pretty sweet.
That is sweet. Yeah.
But yeah, no, so the Denver thing is, I did some booking, and the Old Panther, you came out. Mm-hmm. You guys trashed my backyard for a bit.
Don't say you guys like I had anything to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, some people.
I probably had something to do with it.
You probably had something to do with it. There was
You introduced me to shot skis on that.
Yeah, we had a
tour?
bear. We had a bear stuck in our backyard. That
really? Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So
that's another great Bob story. God, if we could only just make a new podcast called Bob Stories.
Bob Stories, yeah. I mean, calling the people every tour stop.
Yeah, I might do that. Just every time I think of, I remember a new Bob story, I'll be like, yeah, I'll tell this to my phone or something, and I'll be like, Matt, can we do this?
Yeah, I mean, Denver is kind of a city where it's in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing for eight hours either way, anywhere you go. But Denver's always had like a pretty vibrant punk scene, and now they have a much more like a much larger, experimental music scene. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a mid-sized big city. I mean, the only problem is that we have legal weed now, and there's bros moving out to smoke weed, which you've always been able to do there. I mean, I certainly did it before it was legal. So
yeah. You got Red Rocks, bro. You got Dave at Red Rocks.
There's a huge jam band scene which you should take part in. Excuse me.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. Like I almost moved there 2 years ago.
Because I think your thing was
I was going through some shit, and I was like, "Fuck!" I went to see the Replacements with you and some of our friends, and
you wanted to start a Fish cover band and make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
I mean, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
It's not. Nothing's ever out of the question, And now that you're back there, because you did spend some time in LA. Mm-hmm. but now you're back there, and it's never out of the question.
Yeah. So I mean, it's in terms of like I guess like Denver in and of itself is interesting because it's like it's this huge town in the middle of the West, and there's all these people from Iowa there.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that.
It's
actually.
just actually
a lot of people from Dubuque specifically.
Exactly, there's a ton of people from Dubuque, and at times I think that was kind of like, man, why are there there's too many people from Dubuque?
Didn't you tell me there's like a Dubuque bar?
Yeah, there's
that people go to.
There's a Dubuque bar there. So, but at the same time, I mean, at least when I was booking shows, it's if you can make it work, it works really well. I mean, and if not, it's just another big city. There's several of them.
Well, tell me about what you're doing nowadays. I know you were in Uncertain Sea for a while. That was a band that you had up until, 2012 or something like that? I
think we broke up in December of 2012. Yeah.
Okay.
So we would have been around from 2009 to 2012.
Most recently, what you were doing, like, in terms of, like, an original band, right? Because I know you and Jon had the Crazier Horse.
Yeah, so Uncertain Sea had been kind of in a hiatus, sort of like a holding pattern, and we all wanted to play music, but we didn't want to do the Uncertain Sea. And it kind of came from a friend of us, a friend of mine needed to have a band for a cancer benefit.
Okay.
And she said, would one of your bands play? And I said, well, our band's not doing anything. And then we kind of had a collective idea of, let's play a bunch of Neil Young covers. And then some idiot came up with the idea of, let's call it Crazier Horse.
Who was the idiot?
I don't remember. It was somebody. It might have been, yeah, it was, I mean, but the point being is that then out of nowhere, like Crazier Horse kind of became this band that we were getting shows that Uncertain Sea could never get.
That's what happens with, I mean, like, I guess I can't speak on Denver's scene, but like, yeah, if that would have happened around here, then yeah, of course. Like when I was in the Kiss tribute, like I made more in 3 shows than I ever made in my entire life. Being an Old Panther, Grain Belt, Beneath, Legal Fingers, all that shit combined.
Well, yeah, and so
fucking crazy.
So yeah, so Crazier Horse kind of became the band that supplemented Uncertain Sea not playing shows.
Okay.
And so we kind of no pun intended, rode that out as much as we could. And then Uncertain Sea started working pretty heavily again. And so from there, we started thinking like we had a new lineup, and we're like, we're gonna record another record, and then it literally fizzled out. That's all that happened. It literally fizzled out. Really? There's no interesting stories about it beyond it just,
So if it just fizzled out, then it's not out of the question that the Crazier Horse show could be played in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to do that again, I mean, I don't think any of the parties would be opposed, but
yeah,
I mean, everybody has other things going on. People have families now. People are older.
Yeah. So what about the Uncertain Sea? Why'd that break up?
I think it just got to a point where you reach a logical conclusion as a band, and I think I know. I mean, one part of the band wanted to do one thing, another part of the band wanted to do another thing, and neither of those two things had any overlap whatsoever. And so it was like, why continue to fight, back and forth to make something that's not working work?
Yeah.
And so that's what happened with that band. And, we had a good EP. We played a bunch of good shows, but I mean, you can't sort of, again, it became one of those things where it was trying to force something that there's no really point to it continuing to exist. You know what I mean? You're only doing it because you don't want to continue to do the same thing, or excuse me, you don't want to do something different. You know, you just want to keep on with this thing because it's easy. And it just became a thing where for all of us, it was easier to just say, nah, we're not going to do it anymore.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, there was, there was a short little tour out of it, and I mean, like I said, the EP, and those guys
Played South by Southwest, right?
Yep, played South by Southwest, and which was a magical experience. And
Do you still talk to any of those guys?
yeah, yep, I still talk to the everybody who was a part of that band. So, but I mean, again, like that band was only going to go to a certain audience. You know what I mean? And I think some people in that band probably thought it had more potential for a larger audience.
Yeah.
That it never did.
Okay.
I mean, it was only going to be like a select, maybe 500 people on this planet that were going to be into that band. And beyond that, I don't think, trying to push it into further commercial realms was never going to be a thing that was going to happen.
Sure.
So,
was that the end game, commercial realms?
not for some of the people in the band, I don't think, but I think other people in the band thought that there was, that there was a pot of gold at the end of the Econoline van. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that with any band.
Well, I mean, I think at the end it's hard to actually say out at the outset, this is the band that's going to make it.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know. I mean, there's been a ton of bands that I think both of us have liked that have been really much more talented than some of the bands who have made it huge.
Right.
And those bands that you and I both thought, oh, well, they have the talent, they should be huge. They never played for more than 20 people.
Absolutely.
Which is fine.
And we were even talking before the show here, like every one person's idea of making it is another, is not the other person, another person's idea of it,
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, like to me, for instance, getting to play shows and making the music that I want to make. Yeah. That's making it for me.
Absolutely.
And if 10 people,
especially if you're playing it with people that you love, and it's rewarding music.
Exactly. So if 10 people like it, hey, that's a win for me.
Yeah. If one person likes it, it's a win.
Exactly. So if one person likes it, but there's other people who, to them, making it is, they need to play the certain venue. They need to,
right,
and
they got to open for Beck at Red Rocks or whatever.
Hey,
and I just keep picking on Red Rocks because that's where you live.
I don't live at Red Rocks. I live in the city of Denver.
I thought you told me that you lived at Red Rocks.
I live under a tiny rock at Red Rocks.
Oh, that's what you said.
Yeah.
You live by a red rock.
Yeah, I live under a mandolin that was left there by Mumford & Sons. So.
All right, buddy. Well, what else? Like, are you doing anything creatively now or looking for something? What's your scoop now?
I am going to be opening for a band from here, actually, that has one of your chair people. Can we call him chairman of the board?
We can call him a chair.
Chair, okay.
Yep.
Bob Bucca's band Sex Funeral is going to be playing in Denver.
Right.
And
that's in March, right?
That is in March.
Okay.
And my quote.
Plug that shit.
Plug that, okay. March 18th, Bob? Sure. He doesn't know. March 18th, it's Sex Funeral. What are some of the other bands, Bob? Whore Grinder.
We're supposed to pretend he's not here, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Sex Funeral, Whore Grinder, and Load Blower, which would be my project.
Jeremy's brand new project, Load Blower. Been waiting to hear about that.
We'll be playing at Bar in Denver, and it will be a night of many emotions. Yeah, it will be a night of fending off the runoff from the homeless shelter, which is 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
Those are nice guys. I did some work at the homeless shelter. They appreciate the arts.
Good.
Yeah. All right.
Well, you heard it right here from Jeremy that the Denver homeless appreciate the arts.
Yeah.
So
they're big fans. But that's the next thing going on. Okay. And I think Venereal Crush is going to be out in Denver.
True.
On the 7th. So next Thursday, a week from tomorrow.
And you're not playing at that.
I will not be.
You'll be attending.
I will be attending. I will be watching.
You'll be doing a Bic Lighter solo.
I mean, I'll cry.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So,
what else is on the horizon for you, buddy? Before we wrap it up.
waking up tomorrow morning. That'd be nice.
Yep. We are doing this on New Year's Eve, by the way. We're going to spend New Year's Eve together. And
we will be naked.
I'm very excited about
in the
that.
hot tub.
Yeah. If we can find a hot tub, we'll be naked no matter what. But
I think that continuing to do the load blower thing, working on that, and
no, I think we're laughing because the name load blower is so great.
I mean, this is okay. So I mean, without
so you is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely ridiculous, and I don't ever feel the need to explain it.
No.
I mean,
no, there's no
exactly. I mean,
there's nothing to explain.
It kind of comes from
I drank your beer. I'm sorry.
Thanks. The Chubby Cox thing, where it's like, you guys sound like Godspeed, but I'm in a band called Chubby Cox. Like, how do you make those things work?
Right.
So, but yeah, load blower.
Load blower. Look for them in 2016. Not them, really. This is a one-person band.
Yeah. One-man acoustical jam.
Right. So, all right, buddy. How do you think we did?
I think we did okay. I mean,
Anything else you want to talk about? Dubuque-wise or otherwise?
It's the what I see on the side of a truck while we were coming over here, the Majesty on the Mississippi.
The masterpiece on the Mississippi.
I was kind of hoping they would replace it with Dubuque. You'll do. You'll do.
Yeah, just get Carl from Aquatine.
Exactly.
All right, buddy. I love you.
Love you too.
All right, man. Okay, Jeremy Brashaw. See, now I told you that guy is a charismatic fella. And I could be biased because he's one of my best friends, but like, he's got some good stories. And like I said, he was able to fill in a few spots in the timeline in terms of local, particularly 90s local music. He lived it just like I lived it. We were in the shit together. It was good to have him on the show, and I love that guy. And I don't really have much to plug for him, I guess. You heard he's going to be performing as Load Blower, which still makes me laugh to say that. Load Blower, his solo project, is going to be performing with our own Bob Bucko Jr. Sex Funeral in Denver sometime. I don't know. I think March something. It's up to you to find the date. I'm not in Denver, so I can't keep track of this shit. But one more plug I wanted to give Jeremy, and that's that he recently proposed to his girlfriend, Elaine, and they have set the date for June 25th this year, my birthday. But we'll give it to you. It's your day. No, but I just wanted to give them a shout out for that because I love them together, and congratulations. I'm very excited for you. Also, I'm excited to DJ your reception. Okay, nothing but blowfly for like 4 hours. Hope you're ready for that. Anyway, one more quick plug for the January 29th Music Series 10 show. Music Series 10, 11, whatever. Tyranny is Tyranny from Madison, Wisconsin. Young Indian from Dubuque. And Snuff Queen from Dubuque. That should be a great show. $5 suggested donation, 7 o'clock showtime. You know the drill. So come down. Hope to see you all there, or, at least some of you. But that's it for me. Plenty of great guests coming up here on the Ruix podcast. So, hit that subscribe button on iTunes, people, because, the fun does not stop here. I'm telling you what, we got Mississippi Band from here in Dubuque joining us in the studio. Tyranny is Tyranny, in about a month. They're gonna be here playing live and talking to me. So that should be a hoot as well. So just, keep listening. And we'll see you next time.